The truth I'm about to share, it's not something you'll see in headlines. It's not the kind of thing whispered about at Hollywood's parties. No, this is something buried, silenced, locked away where no one is supposed to find it. But I did. It all started with a file, one of 47 left behind by Elena Vargas. She knew too much, and now she's gone. When I opened it, there was this feeling, a chill, like the file itself didn't want to be touched, like something inside it was alive, waiting for someone to let it out. Inside, I found symbols, cryptic ones, and photos that didn't make sense at first. And then there was the schedule. Every page kept leading back to two names, Jay-Z and Beyoncé. Now Beyoncé, that's a whole other story. She has her own file, full of revelations I'll get to eventually. But this story can't wait. This isn't about fame or power. No, it's about worship. Unholy, ancient worship. At the center of it all is something darker than you can imagine. An idol. Not the kind you cheer for, but the kind you fear. And now, you're going to learn the horrifying truth behind Jay-Z's idol. It all started with a phone call I never should have made. Looking back, maybe it was curiosity or stupidity that pushed me to dial her number. The truth was, I needed answers, and M.I.A. was the only one who could give them to me. I sat in my dimly lit office, the single desk lamp casting long shadows across the scattered pages of Elena Vargas's file. That file, it wasn't like anything I'd seen before. Cryptic symbols, grainy photos of celebrities at strange parties, and one name circled again and again, M.I.A. I knew she'd talked to Vargas before she vanished. And if anyone could connect the dots, it was her. I took a deep breath and punched in the number I'd found through a few back channels. The line rang twice before clicking to life. Hello? The voice was cautious, guarded. Ms. Arul Pragasam? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. I'm calling about Elena Vargas. The silence on the other end was deafening. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up. Then finally she spoke, her voice low and tight. I told her to stop. I told her not to dig too deep, but she didn't listen. Now she's gone. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter. I know what happened to her, or some of it. I've seen the files. I'm trying to piece it all together, but I need your help. She let out a bitter laugh, but it sounded hollow, broken. Help you? No one can help you if you keep looking. They'll come for you, just like they came for her, just like they came for me. Her fear was palpable, but I couldn't stop. Not now. What do you mean? Who's they? You know who, she whispered. You've seen the files, haven't you? The symbols, the names. You think Jay-Z and Beyoncé are just people? Just celebrities? You don't know what you're dealing with? I didn't know what to say. She kept going, her voice trembling. They're not just idols. They're something else, something darker. Vessels, maybe. Hosts. And the thing they serve, it doesn't stop. It doesn't forgive. And it doesn't forget. I could feel my pulse quicken as I scribbled notes on a scrap of paper. Tell me about the rituals, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tell me what Vargas found. She hesitated. You don't want to know. I do, I said firmly. I need to know. There was a long silence before she answered. It starts with the parties. Everyone in the industry knows about Diddy's parties. The public thinks they're just exclusive, wild, but they're not really. The real party happens behind closed doors. Behind closed doors? I repeated, leaning closer to the phone. That's where the rituals happen, she said. They use blood, symbols, sometimes even sacrifices, not always human, but close enough. They call it sealing the deal. And once you're in, you're in. There's no getting out. Her words hung in the air like smoke, choking me. And Jay-Z? Beyoncé? How are they involved? She laughed bitterly again. How do you think? They don't just feed off the worship, they need it. It's what keeps them in power. And the more people worship them, the stronger it gets. It? I asked, dreading the answer. The thing they serve, she said. I won't say its name. I won't give it more power. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room seemed darker, colder. Why are you telling me this now? Her voice broke, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. Because I'm tired of being afraid. But I can't help you more than this. They already came for my son. They ruined my life. And I can't, she stopped herself. I can't let them take anything else. Please, I said, my voice cracking. I'm not trying to expose you, I'm trying to stop this. You can't stop it, she said. It's too big, too old, just burn the files. Forget about Vargas. Walk away while you still can. And then she was gone. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Vessels, worship, rituals. It sounded insane, but as I glanced at the files scattered across my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that it all fit. The photos of Diddy's parties, the strange symbols carved into the background of Jay-Z's album art, Beyoncé's cryptic lyrics. They weren't coincidences. They were pieces of a puzzle. And the more I stared, the more the pieces seemed to click into place. My eyes landed on the schedule. One date was circled in red, the night of Diddy's next party. If M.I.A. was right, then this wasn't just another exclusive event. It was something much worse. I should have stopped there, burned the files, pretended I never saw them. But I couldn't, not after what I'd just heard. If there was even a chance that she was telling the truth, I had to find out. I had to go to a party. Diddy party. The more I uncovered, the deeper the darkness seemed to stretch. The files, the music, the call with M.I.A., they painted a picture, but it still felt incomplete, like I was standing on the edge of something too vast to comprehend. That's when I decided I needed help. Not from another investigator, not from someone in the industry. No, this was beyond human scheming. This was ancient. I needed someone who understood what I was dealing with. That's when I thought of Father Anthony. Father Anthony wasn't your typical priest. I'd worked with him before on cases that dabbled in the strange and unexplainable. Cult activity, occult symbols. He had a knack for making sense of things that didn't belong in the modern world. So I called him, and within an hour, I was standing outside his modest church, the stained glass windows casting fractured rainbows onto the stone steps. He met me at the door, his expression grim. "You sounded urgent," he said, ushering me inside. I handed him the file without a word. He flipped through it slowly, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. When he got to the schedule, the one with the date circled in red, he froze. His face turned pale, and he set the papers down carefully, like they might burn him. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A whistleblower," I said. "She's gone now, disappeared. But this was her work." He shook his head, pacing behind the pulpit. "This isn't just dangerous, it's sacrilege. These symbols, these rituals, they're invocations. And this," he jabbed a finger at the schedule, "this isn't just a gathering, it's a summoning." "A summoning of what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He hesitated, then said, "I can't say its name. To speak it is to give it power. But it's ancient, older than the religions we know today. It thrives on worship, on adoration. It feeds on it, growing stronger with every prayer, every chant, every ounce of devotion directed its way." I felt the room grow colder. "You're saying it's tied to Jay-Z and Beyoncé?" Father Anthony looked at me, his eyes haunted. "Not just them, the entire industry. They've built an empire of worship. It's not just their music, it's the image, the idolization. Every screaming fan, every sold-out stadium, every follower who calls them gods, it's all feeding this thing. I sat down heavily in one of the pews, the weight of his words pressing down on me. So, what happens at this party? What's the purpose of the ritual? The ritual is a contract, Father Anthony said, his voice low and deliberate. They offer something, blood, energy, loyalty, and in return, the entity grants them power, influence, immortality in a way. But the more they give, the more it takes, and the stronger it becomes. He leaned on the pulpit, staring at the crucifix behind me as if he couldn't meet my eyes. You need to stop digging. This thing, it doesn't just take power, it takes lives, it consumes them. You've already seen what it did to Vargas. I opened my mouth to respond, but he cut me off, pacing now as if he couldn't stay still. Do you know about the Rock Nation brunches? People think they're just networking events, photo ops, but that's not what they are. They're ceremonies. Invitations only go to those willing to give a part of themselves, spiritually, physically. It's why they're so exclusive. And Beyoncé's performances, the fire, the symbols, the choreography, they're not just art, they're offerings. I felt the words hit me like a punch. Offerings to what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Father Anthony turned to me, his face pale but resolute, to the same thing every ritual serves, an ancient entity, a demon tied to idolatry. In every culture, it goes by a different name, but its purpose is always the same, to feed on worship and devotion. I ran my hands through my hair, the gravity of his words sinking in. What about the stories? The rumors? Are they true? He nodded slowly, as if reluctant to confirm. You've heard about the deaths, haven't you? People tied to the industry who die mysteriously or tragically. Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, Prince. Do you really think they were all coincidences? Sacrifices don't always happen in dark rooms with candles. Sometimes they're public. Sometimes the death itself is the ritual, a way to appease the entity and keep the cycle going. And Jay-Z and Beyoncé? I pressed. What about them? Father Anthony sighed, leaning on the pulpit. Beyoncé's Super Bowl halftime show, the one where people claim to see demonic faces in the flames, that wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Fire is a cleansing force in rituals, a way to show devotion. And her alter ego, Sasha Fierce, you think that's just a marketing gimmick? Number, it's a manifestation, a way to channel something else during her performances. He gestured toward the file in my hands. And Jay-Z, his music is littered with references, if you know where to look. Lucifer isn't just a clever title. It's a nod to the entity they serve, the power they draw from. And his Rock Nation logo, the diamond, it's a veiled reference to the sigils used in summoning rituals. I was about to ask another question when a low groan filled the room, like the creak of wood under immense pressure. My eyes darted to the crucifix hanging above the altar. It was shifting, slowly, impossibly, turning upside down. The air grew thick, heavy, as if the church itself was holding its breath. Father Anthony crossed himself, backing away. You need to leave, now. What's happening? I asked, my voice barely steady. It knows you're here, he said, his voice trembling. You've brought its name too close to sacred ground. Leave. And whatever you do, don't say its name. Not out loud, not ever. I didn't argue. I grabbed the file and bolted for the door, the sound of the creaking crucifix following me into the night. As I drove away, my mind raced, every word Father Anthony said replaying in my head. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they painted was something I wished I could unsee. Rituals disguised as performances, deaths and tragedies masking sacrifices. Worship turned into a weapon. Father Anthony's warnings echoed in my ears. It doesn't just take power, it takes lives. But it wasn't his words that shook me the most. It was the crucifix, twisting itself upside down like something out of a nightmare. Whatever this thing was, it knew I was coming, and it wasn't afraid. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I glanced at the file sitting on the passenger seat. Diddy's party was only days away. The date circled in red felt like it was burning through the page, searing itself into my memory. I'd read enough about these parties to know they weren't what they seemed. M.I.A. had described them as ceremonies, a way to seal deals with blood and devotion. Father Anthony confirmed it. These weren't just networking events for the elite. They were rituals, contracts, and Diddy's mansion wasn't just a venue. It was a temple. I couldn't shake the urgency pounding in my chest. This was my chance, maybe my only chance to see it for myself, to understand what I was really up against. But the closer I got, the more I realized something else. I wasn't just walking into a party, I was walking into a war. The mansion would be the battleground, and the idols of the music industry were already preparing for their performance. I could feel it in my bones. Whatever they were summoning, whatever they were serving, it was already waiting, and I was going straight into its lair. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. I didn't have much time. If I was going to do this, I had to prepare. The file was my map, my guide through the shadows. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. I needed more understanding, more evidence, more courage, and I needed it fast. Because once I walked through those gates, there would be no turning back. With a deep breath, I turned onto the highway, the road stretching out like an invitation to hell. The mansion party was coming, and every instinct I had told me to run. But I didn't. I couldn't. The truth was waiting, and I was going to face it, no matter what it cost me. The mansion loomed in the distance like a dark monolith, its towering gates lit by golden floodlights. The sprawling estate exuded an air of exclusivity and menace, the kind of place you wouldn't dare enter unless invited. But I was here anyway, invitation or not. As I pulled up to the gates, my heart pounded. 2 guards stood by, stone-faced and dressed in tailored black suits. I handed over the forged invitation I'd managed to get my hands on, half expecting them to call me out. But they didn't. They barely glanced at it before waving me through, their indifference somehow more unnerving than suspicion. It was as if they already knew I was supposed to be here. The driveway curved through meticulously landscaped gardens that felt too perfect, too sterile. The mansion itself was massive, its sleek modern lines clashing with the ornate Gothic statues scattered throughout the property. The air buzzed with an unnatural energy, a hum I couldn't explain but felt deep in my chest. As I stepped inside, I was struck by the intimacy of the gathering. This wasn't the wild, hedonistic party you'd expect from someone like Diddy. The guests moved like shadows, dressed in black and whispering in hushed tones. No one greeted me, but no one questioned me either. It was as if they all knew something I didn't. The decor was subtle but deliberate. Black candles flickered on every surface, their flames dancing as if alive. Strange symbols were etched into the marble floors, so faint they were almost invisible, but I recognized them. They matched the symbols from Vargas's files, the same ones Father Anthony had called invocations. I moved through the rooms trying to blend in, though my heart raced with every step. The conversations around me were fragmented, cryptic. I caught snippets of words: the offering, the vessel, the idol. No one spoke in full sentences, as if even their whispers were part of the ritual. Then I saw them. Jay-Z and Beyoncé entered the room like royalty, the crowd parting for them without a word. They were dressed in flowing black, their movements deliberate, almost too perfect. Beyoncé's face was calm, serene, but her eyes looked through people, not at them. Jay-Z held himself with the same quiet authority, his presence commanding the room without needing to speak. The air shifted as they walked past me. It wasn't just the weight of their celebrity. It was something more, something oppressive, They radiated power, but it wasn't theirs. It was borrowed, channeled. I could feel it. The whispers grew louder as they passed. "It's almost time," someone murmured. Time for what? I didn't know, but I wasn't leaving until I found out. I followed the crowd as they moved toward a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. 2 guards stood in front, their expressions blank, their eyes unblinking. One of them nodded, and the doors opened. What lay beyond wasn't just a room, it was a chamber. The air inside was colder, heavier. Black drapes lined the walls, and at the center of the room was an altar made of obsidian, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols I'd seen throughout the house. Candles formed a perfect circle around it, their flames flickering in unison. The air smelled of incense and something metallic, blood maybe. Guests filed in silently, taking their places along the walls. I stayed near the back, trying to stay invisible. At the center of the room stood Jay-Z, Beyoncé, and Diddy. They were dressed differently now, their black robes replaced with shimmering gold and crimson, the colors of blood and power. The ritual began without announcement. Jay-Z stepped forward, his voice low and rhythmic, as he chanted in a language I didn't recognize. The words didn't just fill the room, they vibrated through it, resonating in my chest like a second heartbeat. Beyoncé stood at the altar, her head bowed, her hands resting on a black dagger encrusted with gemstones. Diddy circled them, pouring a thick, dark liquid into a brazier that erupted in green-blue flames. The energy in the room was palpable, suffocating. The guests stood motionless, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on the altar. It was as if they weren't even there, just vessels for whatever was about to happen. As the chanting grew louder, Beyoncé raised the dagger. She sliced her palm, letting the blood drip onto the altar. The flames roared higher, and the symbols etched into the obsidian began to glow. The room vibrated with an unholy energy, and I realized I wasn't just watching a ritual, I was watching a summoning. The air shimmered above the altar, and a figure began to materialize. It was massive, its form barely human. Its molten skin glowed like embers, cracking and oozing black tar. Its eyes burned with an unnatural fire, and its horns spiraled into the void above. This wasn't just a demon. This was something more. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This was what Father Anthony had warned me about. The thing they served, the thing they worshipped. I didn't need to hear its name to know what it was. The room was silent now, save for the crackling of the flames. The guests stood motionless, their heads bowed as if in prayer. Jay-Z turned to Beyoncé, his voice carrying through the room. "The offering is ready." Beyoncé didn't respond. She didn't need to. She lifted her head, her eyes glowing with the same unholy light as the demon above her. And then she smiled. Something snapped inside me. Fear gave way to desperation. If I didn't act now, I'd never have another chance. My legs shook as I stepped forward, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking the ritual like a stone shattering glass. "What are you? What are you doing in the industry? What happened to Elena Vargas?" The demon's head turned sharply, its burning eyes locking onto mine. The weight of its gaze nearly dropped me to my knees, but I held my ground. Its voice came next, low, guttural, vibrating with an unnatural depth that felt like it came from within the earth itself. "I am the fire that consumes," it growled, the words reverberating through the room. "I am the Lord of idols, the Prince of worship. I have ruled over kings and nations, their devotion feeding my strength. I am older than your gods, your books, your meaningless prayers." Its molten skin shifted and cracked as it spoke, its horns curling like living serpents. "This industry, your music, is my temple. The voices of millions rise to me like incense. Their worship is mine, their souls my feast. Elena Vargas was a fool. She sought to tear down what cannot be undone." My hands shook as I stepped closer, heart pounding in my ears. I had one last card to play. Tell me your name, I demanded, my voice cracking. What are you called? The creature tilted its head, the fire in its eyes blazing brighter. You know my name, mortal. To speak it is to give it power. To hear it is to know fear. Say it, I shouted, the words ripping from my throat. Tell me your name. The flames surged, the symbols on the altar glowing brighter. The guests let out a low, collective moan as the demon's body writhed, its form twisting into something even more grotesque. It leaned forward, its voice now a roar that shook the walls. I am Baal, it bellowed, the sound stretching into a guttural, otherworldly growl. Baal! The room shuddered as the name reverberated through the air, a sound so horrifying, so primal, it felt like it was tearing through my very soul. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor, clutching my chest as the fire roared higher, casting the demon's shadow across the room. The guests began to chant again, their voices rising to match the flames. The demon stepped forward, its burning eyes fixed on me. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I was frozen, paralyzed by its presence. It moved closer, its molten form radiating a suffocating heat. I managed to stumble backward, finally finding my feet. I turned and bolted for the door, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. The sound of its roar chased me down the hallway, echoing in my ears even as I burst into the night. As I ran to my car, the mansion's lights burned like a beacon in the darkness, the shadow of the demon seeming to stretch across the sky. My hands trembled as I started the engine, the name still ringing in my mind, Baal. My breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. I was alive, but I didn't feel safe. Not here, not anywhere. The winding road out of the gated community felt endless, the shadows from the towering trees on either side stretching and twisting unnaturally in the dim glow of my headlights. I could still feel the demon's burning eyes on me, the suffocating weight of its presence. I glanced at the file on the passenger seat, the only thing I had to make sense of what I'd just seen. Then, I saw it. A figure, illuminated by my headlights, hanging from the branch of an enormous tree by the side of the road. My stomach dropped as I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt just feet from the shadowy form. The body swung gently, almost mockingly, its head lolling at an unnatural angle. I didn't want to get out. Every instinct screamed for me to keep driving, but something pulled me forward. I stepped out of the car, my legs weak beneath me, and walked closer. The body came into focus and my blood turned to ice. It was me. Same clothes, same face, the same look of terror frozen in my eyes, but twisted with something worse. A smile, wide and grotesque, etched across my dead lips. The sight nearly dropped me to my knees. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as bile rose in my stomach. The message was clear. I was marked. This wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Baal's reach wasn't confined to the mansion or the industry. It was everywhere. And they want you to think it's just music, just entertainment, just harmless fun, but it's not. Every cheer, every download, every idol you worship, it feeds something bigger, darker, something ancient. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've faced it, and I've barely escaped with my life. Elena Vargas tried to expose this, and she paid the price. Others have too. M.I.A. spoke out, and no one believed her. They called her crazy, blackballed her, and tore her life apart. But now, you know the truth. This isn't just my fight, it's hers. It's for all the victims of Jay-Z, Diddy, and Beyoncé, the ones who were silenced so this machine could keep turning. If this resonated with you, share it. Like, subscribe, and spread the word. Help me give M.I.A. and the others the justice they deserve. Together, we can pull back the curtain and make sure their voices aren't lost. This fight isn't over. It's just beginning.